say that we are seeking the answer to several questions that have arisen out of a story told the other day. And those questions are, what is it that's been ever present in our life that has disallowed us from being seduced, from being stuck in being something, or this or that? And the second question is, where are we when everything is the same and nothing is the same? Our sensory awareness tells us that the smell of grass is still the smell of grass. The sound of the birds is still the sound of the birds. And yet our experience of them is totally changed. And we cannot go back to experiencing them as they were. So in an endeavor to find the answers to these questions, there are several stories about books. Now books, as we can say, are symbolic of knowledge. So let's see what these stories do for us in bringing an answer to these questions. The first is that story about the learned professor and lecturer in history, who, it is believed, lived in England at the time. But he died and left his very extensive library of books to his devoted and favorite student, who himself was becoming a lecturer and teacher in history. So when the student took this collection of books and was going through them, he came across a strange volume with strange and odd symbols on the cover. So he sat down to read this volume, and within it he found that there were certain instructions which actually allowed one to be taken back in time, to be taken back in history, to experience that time. So using the instructions that were in the volume, he did just that. But when he went back in time, he found that the experiences he was having was totally different to what was written in the history books and that which was being taught. So using the instructions that were in the book, he came back to this time, so to speak. But he found that because of his experiences, he could no longer teach in the way that the books instructed. So it wasn't long before this came to the notice of the other professors and the powers that be in the establishment in which he was working. So he was fired from his job. And he became an alcoholic, a ne'er-do-well, so to speak. And he had to sell all the books to be able to buy that which fulfilled his sukha. But there came an occasion when a scholar from the Middle East was traveling in England, and he happened to go into the bookstore where the collection of books was being sold, and he was drawn to that volume. And when he took it back to his home place somewhere in the Middle Eastern area, maybe Oman or somewhere like that. And he delved into this volume. He too was taken by the possibility of being taken back in time and experiencing life as it was. So this is exactly what he did. But he too found that the experiences that he had in that time and what he learned from those experiences was totally different to what was being taught in the various establishments, whether they be religious or scholastic or the like. So he began to talk to his friends about it in the coffee shop and in the learned scholastic circles in which he moved. But of course, he became branded as a heretic and an apostate, and was shunned by all his friends and his peers and his compatriots. So he took the book and threw it out of the window. And it happened to be picked up by one of those scavengers that took such goods and chattels to a flea market. So one day, a tourist from maybe United States or the like, a very Catholic young being, happened to be in that flea market and was taken by this book, by the emblems and the symbols that were on its cover. So he took it home. But he was of such a faith that he thought to himself, well, you know, these symbols and these hieroglyphics are very, very strange. I better seek my advisor before I read this volume. So he took it to his bishop, and he asked his bishop what he thought, whether he should be allowed to read this book and learn its contents. And of course the bishop, when he saw the emblems and the symbols and the hieroglyphs, no, don't even go there. Don't delve into this book at all. Leave it here with me and go about your life and business. Don't go into those things which are beyond your ken. So, of course, the book sat on the bishop's table for some little while, and every time he passed it, he thought to himself, I wonder what was in it. You know, but I'm such a learned, I'm so entrenched and fixed in there was nothing that's going to be able to seduce me out of my faith. It won't hurt me just to open it up and have a look at it. So this is exactly what he did. He opened up the book, and of course, as we know what happened, he became totally into what it was telling and the possibilities that were there. How interesting to go back in time and experience the way it was. So he did exactly what the book instructed that he should do, and he found himself in this very, very dark place. And he could hear strange sounds like grunts and hisses and groans and other unidentifiable sounds. And when his eyes grew accustomed to the dark, he found that he was in a cave, and around him were these beings wearing furs and skins and things and bones around their necks and making grunting sounds between them. But then, of course, what he was there, and he thought, well, here I am in this time. I have to teach these people about the faith. So he began to teach what he had been taught and so forth. But then, as time passed, he completely forgot the instructions about how to get back to his manse and his place, and it's believed that he's still there still. And the second story is about that king who is about to leave his body. And he called his son, the prince, to him who was going to take over the throne. And he handed his son, the prince, a volume bound in a piece of very fine green silk with a cord binding it. And he said to his son, "Son, you must read this volume. It contains all of the mysteries of the ages. Read it, my son." And he died. But the prince, having to go through all of the motions of becoming a king, all the festivities, the being crowned, etc., etc., and then all the duties of being a king, taking care, listening to people's troubles, solving the ways of his kingdom. There was no time and possibility for him to unbind the volume that his father had given him. But one day there was a moment when he opened the drawer in his chamber where the book was kept, and taking it out, feeling the very fine silk, the cord with which it was bound, he decided that he was going to read this tome. Now, of course, there were intrusions. His queen coming to ask him whether this robe and these pearls were suiting her. But he sent her away. "Go, I'm going to read." When his advisors come to tell him various things that were going on in the kingdom, came to him to say, "No, go, these things can wait. I'm going to read this book." And so he did. But after reading the book, he closed it up. He bound it carefully in the green silk, tied it with the cord. And then he went to his queen and he said, "I'm leaving. Do not look for me, but take my place and rule until our son is old enough to take over the throne." And the king, discarding his robes, his crown, putting down his scepter, so to speak, dressing himself in the garb of an ordinary man, he left the palace. And years passed until one day an old man with a beard, wearing straw sandals, wandered in to a coffee shop, holding in his hands a small parcel wrapped in fine green silk and bound with a cord, who asked the coffee shop owner, "Please, will you do me a favor?" and offering him a few coins. Take this to the palace and ensure that it is given to your king. The old man disappeared and was never seen again. But the book indeed was handed to the prince, now a king. Books, knowledge, where do these stories take us as we explore answering the questions? What is it that's been ever present in our life that has not allowed us to be seduced, to resting, to saying, I am a this or I am a that, I am a healer, I am a teacher, And where are we when every moment everything is the same and nothing is the same? Knowledge. What does it mean for us? Knowledge.